hopefully in about 15 minutes, try to rattle through the situation as I see it, both in terms of what's been going on in Palestine, what's been going on globally, and most importantly, what's been, for us, what's been going on with the massive wave of global solidarity for the people of Palestine that you've seen mobilise around the world despite all the odds and despite all the calumnies and lies that have been thrown at that movement. Because I think the role of that movement in the last few days has actually shifted the picture quite a bit, which might sound like quite a tall thing to say, but I hope by the time I've finished explaining that position, it will seem perhaps you'll see what I mean by that. Okay, so if we wind back to Sunday night, the situation for the people of Gaza looked incredibly grave, even worse than what we are currently seeing them do. Israel had basically given an order to evacuate the entire north of Gaza Strip, which is 1.1 million out of 2 million people, into the south, and they gave a 24-hour deadline, which was widely seen to be impossible. Politicians were refusing to even call for humanitarian aid. They were, journalists were asking, "Isn't this a war crime?" and they were refusing to answer. There was, in the military press, the plans that were being leaked there were saying that and Israel still may do this if they can get away with it. The plans were to basically level the entirety of Gaza City, the entirety of the north of Gaza, and drive the Palestinians out, at least into refugee camps into the south, but ideally drive them out into Egypt and thus have a second Nakba. That is Israel's ideal goal in this situation. And they came very close to it. America was busy bribing the Sisi dictatorship to basically, we'll write off your foreign aid if you open up the Rafah crossing and accept this. However, that didn't work out, or hasn't worked out so far at any rate, and I'll come to why in a bit. So, very grave situation on Sunday night. By Monday, however, something flipped. And I think you might have noticed that imperialism and the big powers have been kind of on the defensive and stepping back from that brinkmanship and that position that they were taking on Sunday. And I think that's because they saw the massive protests across the Arab world on Friday and actually huge protests in the West as well on the Saturday. And that made them blink and that made them think twice. In particular, you've got to remember about protests in the Arab world. The Arab Spring was only 10 years ago. People remember what happened. They are very clued up about this. They've learned their mistakes as well. There are protests in Egypt today where people are denouncing the Camp David Accords. The last time people dared to chant protests in Egypt against the Camp David Accords was the Arab Spring. Sisi is absolutely bricking himself and has actually gone onto TV and said, "No way will I collaborate with the second Nakba. I will declare war on Israel if they ever try to do that." I mean, it's probably bullshit coming from Sisi, but it's very rare that they would make that kind of claim on TV at any rate. So while the mass demonstrations here in Britain certainly put Starmer and Sunak and all of those people on the defensive, and Starmer has now basically set fire to whole sections of the Labour Party and is scrabbling to kind of keep control because he's now saying, "Oh yes, humanitarian things are okay," and "Oh yes, actually war crimes are bad," and none of it is making any sense, and people are screaming in anger at him, and serves him right. The reason for that isn't, of course, that Starmer had a major change of heart. One, he was scared by what he saw on the streets here on Saturday, but two, America is also pulling back, and America is kind of, eventually Starmer gets the memo. When Biden starts talking about humanitarian stuff, about a day later Starmer will start talking about humanitarian stuff. So that's what's going on there. However, what is happening around in Egypt, I've mentioned what's going on in Egypt. Tomorrow, Biden was meant to go on a little kind of glad-handing tour around the Arab states. In Jordan, the most placid, there was no Arab Spring in Jordan, the most placid and pet of the American regime. Jordan was going to kind of, show him round. Jordan called it off last night, right? So the hospital bombing has turned everything round. Lebanon, there is fighting back and forth on the border, shells going back and forth. This happens quite a bit. There is always the chance that might blow up into a second front. That's what happened in 2006. But Iran doesn't want that, and Israel doesn't want that. So I suspect that that's just going to be a bit of a phony war for now. Egypt is the point to look at. The other major development today is people in the West Bank, Palestinians in the West Bank, are demonstrating in Ramallah, demonstrating in front of the Palestinian Authority, and using the classic chant from the Arab Spring, the people demand the fall of the regime, directed at Abbas and his cronies and his collaborators. So that's a kind of sense of what is happening in the Arab world and how electric this all is. And you have to see the demonstrations in London, in Paris, in America, wherever, as all part of that global solidarity movement for the Palestinians that is telling a message to their ruling classes that you can't just get away with this like you got away with slaughtering people in Syria. Yeah, this time round, we are paying attention, and that is putting the fear of God up all of them, and that's a really important thing for us to remember. Now, it seems that this plan to level Gaza, we've managed to put a spanner in the works. You know, that what has happened so far has put a spanner in the works, but that creates a kind of dangerous stalemate, and this is why I think elements of the Israeli military bombed that hospital. You know, one of the things to understand here is that Israel is also in complete and utter crisis. You know, you might remember those big demonstrations that were happening in Tel Aviv. You know, Zionism is beset by contradictions, and all the different factions are fighting each other in the wake of this massive blow that the Palestinians inflicted on them a week ago. In particular, the political apparatus in Israel is completely paralysed and discredited, and the military is more or less doing its own thing. And I suspect sections in the military have decided, they've spotted that the American backing is getting a little bit colder, and they're going for a little kind of strategy of tension, like an atrocity, to get people to push or jump. Now, I think that's a very dangerous strategy for them. I think it's a strategy that's backfired, because what we've seen now is essentially America, the core states of America, Britain, France and Germany are backing Israel, but absolutely everyone else is moving away. You know, for the past 2 years, we've had propaganda in the press about how the Gulf states are all going to recognise Israel, and Israel's going to normalise its relationship with the Arab states. Every single damn one of them, you know, Saudi, Jordan, the lot of them are now like jumping away and going, rather than hang out with these psychos, we're going to take our chances with China and Beijing, and China and Iran, and Russia for that matter. Now, that is the very opposite of what America wants to happen, because America's fundamental war is with China, and what is happening now is it's ratcheting up the tension but losing all its international allies, and it would be very, very stupid to go any further, but do not rule out the possibility that our imperial ruling classes can do very, very stupid things. What I'm trying to get across to you is that the mass mobilisation on Saturday has turned this into a complete crisis in the ruling class. There are people screaming at each other, saying, let's bomb this, no, don't do that, that's stupid. That is happening right now. And if we keep up the pressure and keep up building this new movement that we've seen arise on the streets in the last few weeks, and it's been absolutely miraculous to watch and extraordinary to see in terms of its sophistication and its resilience. But if we can keep that pressure up and build that movement further and connect it with a wider hatred of politicians that's out there and was out there in spades anyway, we've got a chance to really take this further and not only secure some kind of justice for the politician, but actually cause a serious splintering and weakening in the imperial murder machine that has been their oppressor for so many years. Thank you.